Hello and welcome to the Analyst by Vajiram and Ravi, your daily guide to decoding current affairs the smart way for UPSC. It's January 22nd, 2026 and today's edition brings two important analysis articles for your mains examination. First, judicial removal in India, a tough constitutional process riddled with practical loopholes, what it means for accountability and judicial independence. Second, India's shrinking deltas. We will be examining climate change, river management, and the growing ecological and livelihood risks in coastal regions of our country. Finally, in our simplified section, we will be covering updates which are highly crucial for the upcoming prelims 2026 examination. So let's begin. Guys, in recent times, the accountability of judges, the questions on judges' conduct, and the various cases of corruption against judges at our High Court and Supreme Court level have propped up. And recently, there have been 107 MPs who have sought the removal of Justice G.R. Swaminathan, who is the judge of Madras High Court. And in this context, Mr. P.D.T. Achari, who had been penning down extensive articles on our various facets and pieces of our Indian polity, starting from parliament to judiciary, today he is talking about the judicial removal process, which is extremely crucial, guys, because the Judges Inquiry Act of 1968, which is a cornerstone legislation behind such removal of judges, is highly crucial for your prelims. Also, the questions regarding judicial accountability, the issues in judiciary, the impartiality of judges, the ethical conducts a judge in our country has to obey by, these are all important for your mains examination. Sometimes these cases or these topics you can also use GS for answers. So let us start by actually understanding in the very first instance that why judicial removal is such a sensitive issue. All of you guys know that the High Court and the Supreme Court judges perform perhaps one of the most important responsibilities apart from the Prime Minister of our country. Because the Prime Minister belongs to the executive and the legislature. So they are actually tasked along with the Council of Ministers with maintaining law and order in the country, enacting various legislations, also looking after the welfare of our country. On the other hand, the constitution of our country, even via the fundamental rights, have empowered the courts in our country to actually hold the executive in accounts of some corruption cases or any other violations of fundamental rights, some illegal affairs and various other things. So that is why, guys, the office of judges are actually very crucial because they have to be independent of politics. They have to actually uphold the foundational values of our constitution, which is actually known as the constitutional morality. Actually, this is what gives life to our constitution, ethical dimensions to our constitution. And the judges, while they are passing orders and the various judgments, they always keep in mind the core constitutional values. And at the end of the day, individually, all of the judges are actually expected to have highest standards of ethical conduct in public and even in private life. So these are actually the reasons why the offices of judges are actually so important, not only in our country, but also in the rest of the world. Now, if you see that there are some questions regarding some judges. For example, regarding Justice G.S. Swaminathan, he is alleged to be close to a very particular political party. In 2025, we also have seen the raging case of Justice Yashwant Verma, where in his New Delhi residence, various burnt notes were found. Right? You can only imagine what can be the degree of a scandal of this case. So this is exactly what right now, if you have seen over the last 1 year, there have been so many questions which have been raised on our Supreme Court's impartiality, on our High Courts and the various judges there and their conducts. And this is why if you find any constitutional office to be not following the values enshrined in our constitution or they are going against the public welfare or public interest, definitely we have the option to remove them. We have the same for our president, we have the same for our prime minister, we have the same for Election Commission of India. But when we talk about the judges, we actually have various stringent processes, right? For example, we actually follow a very detailed, layered instrument when we talk about the removal of judges, and that is why we also have a particular act here. So Actually, we have to understand that to remove any Supreme Court judge or any High Court judge, the process that is followed is actually very, very stringent. Why? Because we have to ensure that the judge is not removed due to political reasons, that the judge is removed with a political consensus in the parliament, and that is exactly what brings us to the Judges Inquiry Act. Now, the main statutory framework for the removal of judges in our country is actually followed in this particular Act of 1968, wherein this Act is deriving powers from two constitutional articles pertinent to the Supreme Court and the High Court judges. Right? For example, Article 124 and Article 217 and 18 of our Constitution empower the Parliament of our country to legislate an Act. That Act can have the detailed procedure as to how and exactly what the investigation norms has to be followed for the removal of Supreme Court judges and the High Court judges. So that is exactly why we have to understand that the Parliament enacted this Act and also the Judges Inquiry rules. Now guys, when we talk about the removal of our judges, be it the High Court or the Supreme Court, we generally have two grounds. For example, the proved misbehavior and incapacity, which are actually the constitutional basis of the removal of judges in our country. But we have to actually understand that these terms are not defined in the Constitution, correct? And that is why through various cases, for example, through the Veeraswamy case of 1991 and the Krishnaswamy case of 1992, the Supreme Court actually talked about how and when the instances of judges' misbehavior and incapacity can be proved. For example, when we talk about incapacity, it refers to the physical or mental inability of some judges to perform their duties, right? It is quite understandable. But when we talk about misbehavior and which has to be proved, this becomes very, very controversial, correct? Now, when we talk about the Veeraswamy case, the Supreme Court ruled that any deviation of ethical standards of some judge, whether it is related to corruption or various other case, right, it is deemed to be betrayal of trust in democracy, betrayal of trust in our judicial institutions. If a judge is not following ethical standards, it is equal to betrayal of the trust in that constitutional office. So this is what this case told, and this case actually held the ethical absolutism to be the high standard when we talk about a judge and their conduct. So a judge must be following the highest standards of all ethical conducts. Now this was further elaborated in the 1992 case, where we have to understand that the Supreme Court differentiated that there can be some instances where there are some errors in judgment or errors in the various investigation processes, due to which a judge can make some unintentional mistakes. So that is where an honest mistake can be treated as an error, and that cannot be treated as a misconduct, correct? So in case of some non-intentional error, that is not taken as a misconduct. But in cases where the judges have willfully, right, been delivering some wrong judgments or taking some political party side, or themselves are corrupt, taking cash and various other things, or they're actually acting with an intention to hurt the various constitutional values, that is actually where we can actually term that as misbehavior. And that is exactly where starts the process of the removal of judges. Now guys, we have to understand that formally, the word impeachment for the removal of judges is not mentioned in the Constitution. Can you, any one of you, mention in the comments for whom impeachment is actually mentioned in the Constitution? But for the judges, it is not. What we have is a removal, where the step one starts with the motion, where the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha MPs are involved. Where in the Lok Sabha you need 100 MPs and in the Rajya Sabha you need 50 MPs for the motion to be submitted. Now, here the loophole starts. For example, the speaker or the chairman, the speaker of the Lok Sabha, the chairman of the Rajya Sabha, they can actually accept or reject this motion. This is where our author is highlighting that this is a very crucial loophole, because this is a constitutional discretion here, which is given to the speaker and the chairman to either accept or reject. Because in some cases, for example, you can imagine just for 1 second that if a judge has been delivering a judgment which is very pro-ruling government, so that means that judge is acting in political capacity or say taking some political side, So if the political parties belonging to the opposition, they contest this via this motion, do you think the speaker, who is themselves from the ruling party, they will admit the motion here? So this is exactly what the loophole is. Now, nevertheless, the step 3 is talking about an inquiry committee where there will be 3 members. Now, they can be a Supreme Court judge, a High Court Chief Justice, or a experienced jurist. Now, they will be actually be investigating the various charges against that judge who is actually under the scanner, under this particular motion. Then, after the committee has done the studies and done the various investigation, they will be submitting the same to the parliament. The parliament will be voting it. Now here you need a special majority where you need more than 50% of the total strength and 2/3 of the member present and voting. This is actually quite difficult, guys, because this you have to do in both of the houses, right? And after you have done that, at the end, the president will be signing the order and then the judge is removed. So this is a detailed process which you can understand. First level of difficulty is where the speaker will be admitting the motion or not. Second level of difficulty is where you actually undergo the voting process in the parliament, where both of the houses will be having the special majority status. So this is exactly why we have to right now focus on the loophole, guys. So this act, Judges Inquiry Act of 1968, allows the speaker or the chairperson to actually disallow the motion. Correct? Now, if at all, you have 100 plus MPs in this case right now, even this strength does not matter, guys, because the speaker has that kind of discretion to deny the case. So this is exactly why we have to understand that this loophole is very crucial to fix. Correct? Because the speaker or the chairperson, if they are denying the motion, they need not give any conditions. They need not give any written submission. They need not cite any reasons for that. Why they denied or why that motion was not accepted by the speaker, no accountability is there. Right? It is a complete discretionary behavior. That is why no record is done. So you can already understand why this is extremely problematic in the first place. Now, when we talk about another aspect here, another angle, which the author is very clever to highlight here, that the speaker is actually acting as a statutory authority. Now, you guys know that the speaker or the chairperson who can remove judges of the Supreme Court and the High Court, right, they actually fall under the act, right, of Judges Inquiry Act of 1968. Now, when this act is there, which has been enacted by the parliament, so when the speaker, for example, is accepting or denying the motion, the speaker is performing a statutory act. That means the act of the speaker to accept or reject is not a legislative act because that speaker or chairperson is in the parliament. It does not matter. What matters is that the speaker is rejecting, for example, based on an act, and any act can be challenged at the courts, right? So it can be subjected to judicial review. So that is why the speakers must also be aware that they are not performing a legislative act while they are denying some motions here regarding the removal of some High Court and Supreme Court judges, but they have to be highly aware that just because there is an act known as Judicial Inquiry Act which has been passed by the parliament, and in case of any contravention of any act, you can go to the court. So in such cases, if you feel that the speaker did not perform their duties well, you can actually go to court for a judicial review. So the speakers must realize that actually their actions are subjected to judicial review. Also, if you can understand, the process where the president is removed, so the motion admission by the speaker is mandatory for the president and the speaker cannot reject it. So why the same case is not in favor of the judges here? So this is what we have to also question, guys. Now there are various other issues also. For example, guys, here also according to the Judicial Inquiry Act, first the motion has to be presented by the MPs of the said number in Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha to the speaker, right? So the MPs to the speaker. Then the speaker, if they accept the motion, it will be going to the inquiry committee, right? So inquiry committee will be investigating the case in detail, correct? And they will be gathering all the proofs of corruption and various other misbehavior. And then only, that will be presented to the legislature, for example, here, the parliament, right? And then they will be voting on the same. Now guys, for example, if the speaker is itself denying it in the very first stage, right, he is not accepting the motion at all. So how the proof will be coming in the later phases? So the speaker must actually try to allow the motion, correct, for the proof to be gathered by the inquiry committee. So that is why we have to understand the proof must be coming after the inquiry, not before, because the speaker themselves does not carry any investigation. Correct. So this is what is also a very serious concern. Also, the political risk is highlighted by the author. For example, serious constitutional mechanism with reference to some judge who had been delivering, for example, if just imagine where a judge has been delivering some favorable judgment for the majority party. So therein, this huge political will which is at the majority or the ruling party here, right, they can influence the judiciary also in this way. So in such serious constitutional cases, right, we have to actually understand how the judges and their impartiality becomes so important, that if at all there are some judges who are misbehaving in this way, right, they have to be removed. Now the next issue is that impeachment motion is actually quite rare. For example, if you see into the past, where we have so many judges who have been kind of alleged of various irregularities. For example, here you have 3 cases here, but so far none of the judges have been impeached so far. So this means definitely the process which is there in the Judges Inquiry Act is quite comprehensive. It is quite fail proof, right? Also we have to understand that if the speaker is interfering in the very first instance by rejecting the motion, they are actually making the things much more difficult for the overall investigation that will be carried forward later on. And at the end of the day, 100 plus MPs have signed the recent motion. That means definitely there have been some cases of allegations, and that is why they have signed the same. Otherwise they would not do the same, because they are our MPs. We have sent them with our own trust to the parliament, and that is why we have to understand that not accepting the motion by the speaker is actually very, very politically costly, because at the end of the day, the political party at the center, at the ruling level, right, they will be criticized, they will be held accountable in the parliament again. There will be, for example, say some chaos, some paper throwing, chair throwing in the parliament again, right? And also we have to understand that this all activities are publicly visible. I'm talking on this matter right now, right? And various instances of such cases are eroding the public trust in judiciary publicly. So this is what we have to understand. There are some reforms which are pending in the same process here when we talk about the removal of judges. While the Judges Inquiry Act is fine, we have to embolden it. For example, firstly, we have to remove the speaker or the chairperson's discretion. We need to give a time frame to the speaker, or the speaker must be kind of giving some written and published reasons as to why they are not allowing the particular motion to be carried forward. Also, there are so many political activists and the experts in our country who are recommending that independent judicial complaints authority must be set up, which must be also a constitutional authority, because the same power can be derived from the constitutional provisions of removal of judges. So this can actually look into the various cases of such instances of the misbehavior of High Court and Supreme Court judges, because here mainly when we talk about the speaker is kind of a gatekeeper, right? For example, here if you see the traffic police, if the traffic police on itself, by himself, if he is setting the signal to red and green according to his own discretion, that is not a very fair thing to do, right? Then he can control the roads according to his own friends and relatives, right? That is why there must be an automatical trigger inquiry when we talk about some misbehavior allegation and whatever the allegation against the judges are. Also, in the constitution itself, there can be a constitutional amendment to clearly define what misbehavior it is, or if not the constitutional amendment, we can actually try to state the same under Judges Inquiry Act of 1968. We can define what misbehavior really is, following the various Supreme Court cases before. Also, there must be time-bound inquiry process, because sometimes it has been seen that the inquiry committee has been taking forever just to delay the case, for example, maybe. Also, there must be graded sanction system for some judges, right? For example, if some judges are found to be willfully be found in misconduct, their judgments must be reviewed again. The cases which are transferred to them can be taken back. They can be transferred with reference to some penal provisions. They can be also be subjected to various stringent conditions by the Supreme Court itself, because the Supreme Court actually at the end of the day looks after the administration of the judicial system in the country. And at the end of the day, there is one very crucial document known as the Restatement of Judicial Values, which is actually containing the various rules and responsibilities and the ethical conducts of the judges in our country. We can make this legally enforceable via an act of the parliament. So this is exactly how we can get rid of such loopholes. And there is one practice question for all of you usually. So this is what you can answer me in the comments below. Now we'll be moving on to the next topic. So guys, the next article is actually on the status of India's sinking deltas, because this is directly attributed right now to climate change and the associated sea level rise, which is why the deltas are sinking at a very, very rapid pace. So let us look at it from the perspective of geography, environment, climate change and disaster management. Now guys, in the very beginning, no matter how basic the topic is, always whenever you get a mains question, you have to start with a proper introduction where you have a definition of the term of river delta. Now for example, when we talk about river deltas, for example, if you can look at this figure here of Sundarbans, correct? Now if you see the entire area, the vast expanse of the Sundarbans, these are nothing but the mud, the sediment and the peat that flowed down along with the rivers from the mountains, right, down to the open seas. So these are all the sediments which have flowed down from the mountains, from the Himalayas and down to the plains and finally to the mouth of our river which flows out in the ocean, right? Now whenever a river meets an ocean, it dumps the various sediments there itself. So this is where we find the formation of delta, which is a triangular area formed by the accumulation of sediment carried by the river as it meets a slower moving or stagnant water such as the ocean. So this is exactly how the deltas are formed. Also you have to understand guys that the deltas are actually very soft lands. Why? Because these are actually made by new mud and the sediment which come down and flow along with the rivers. They are deposited here and gradually layers of new muds are deposited every year. Correct? And this is why these lands are actually very, very prone to land subsidence, or a case where the land subsides below the sea level just because of its soft nature. Correct? Also, when we talk about the lands there surrounding the deltas, these are actually one of the most fertile regions of our entire world, just because of the huge number of sediments, the huge number of nutrients where these are brought by the rivers, and this is where they are deposited at the mouth of the oceans. Along with the same, the oceans have their own nutrients which make this highly fertile and a very unique place in the areas where they are actually found in the world. So this is why you find very dense populations, high level of agricultural development, and also huge number of cities and ports are reliant on such ecosystems where we find river delta. More than 340 million people globally actually live there. But when we talk about the recent Nature report and the study, we find that there is a global subsidence of river deltas not only in India but also in the rest of the world, that at least 35% of the area of the deltas are sinking. And this is what brings us to this PYQ of 2015. Now this PYQ is asking you to identify which of these areas have a combination of mangrove forest, evergreen forest and a deciduous forest. You let me know the answer in the comments below. Also now, when we actually focus on the report right now, the report is telling that the Ganga, Brahmaputra river system, the Brahmani, Mahanadi, Godavari, Kaveri and the Kabani river systems and their deltas are all sinking. Correct? If you can see here, 90% of the deltas are affected here. And the speed at which the Brahmani and Mahanadi, for example, are decreasing and sinking, it is at a very, very fast rate at more than 5 millimeters per year. And it is actually mainly attributed to climate change and the global rise in sea levels. Because due to climate change, we have more CO2 trapped in the atmosphere, which actually leads to a lot more global warming, which leads to melting of glaciers. And this melting of glaciers and also the Arctic and the Antarctic ice, they increase the sea level. And that is why most of the lands of the deltas which are already low lying, they come under the seawater. And that is why when we talk about definition of subsidence, that is what the deltas are undergoing right now. Subsidence is actually the gradual sinking or setting of the earth's surface downwards. It can happen due to natural processes, right? For example, if some of the deltas become too heavy due to the various sediments and the rocks which are brought down from the rivers, sometimes due to natural reasons under its own weight, the deltas can subside down. But mainly the subsidence which are happening right now are due to human acceleration. For example, we are extensively withdrawing groundwater, and you know guys, deltas are already softer region. If we withdraw the water table there, it will be becoming much more softer, right? Also, the sediment blockage mainly due to the dams which we have constructed in the Himalayan regions. They block the sediments, and these new sediments do not come to the deltas to create new land. If new land is not created, old land automatically will be coming down under the sea level. Also, the urban load, for example, in various coastal cities, we will be examining the case of Kolkata here, where under its own weight of the various monuments, of the various buildings, Kolkata is gradually sinking. Now, how all of these things have been captured? Using extensive satellite figures and using technology. For example, the Nature report is actually using Sentinel-1 satellite, which is actually very crucial for your prelims examination because it is actually operated by the ESA, the European Space Agency, where they have one very sensitive apparatus known as INSAR, where they can look into millimeter changes in heights of the lands. So just imagine how precise that instrument is. Also, we have used GRACE satellites, which is a collaboration between German aerospace and NASA, which can also look into the changes in Earth's gravity fields. And using this, we can actually understand how the groundwater is distributed and they move between and under the deltas. Also, we have used an AI algorithm known as random forest model as to look into the declining forest cover and the various other impacts of the same, correct? So this is where right now let us specifically look into the causes of the various river deltas. For example, when we look into the Ganga Brahmaputra delta system, right, mainly groundwater extraction is making the Sundarbans very sensitive because 90% of the area is sinking. Next comes Brahmani river. Due to rapid urbanization, we are also seeing 77% of the delta being sinking at 5 millimeter per year, which is a very rapid rate. If you can actually understand this multiplied into 10 years, it will actually lead to a submergence of much of the land, where maybe there are lots of farming communities, there are lots of indigenous communities living there who will be losing their homes. Also, the Mahanadi river in Orissa and the deltas associated are actually declining due to urbanization and extensive mining. 69% of the delta is decreasing at the same rate again. Godavari river deltas are decreasing and sinking due to groundwater, and the subsidence at the Godavari river deltas will be exceeding even the world average sinking rate of the other river deltas around the world. Also, the Kaveri river in Tamil Nadu is decreasing due to the groundwater extraction, and at the end of the day, the Kabani river deltas in Kerala, right, they are also confirmed to be decreasing higher and faster than the global rate. Now, when we talk about the case of Kolkata here, it is an urban area, we all know, right, which is actually consisting of so many buildings. And this is what is making the city very heavy, because you can actually understand the location of Kolkata is actually quite closer to the coastal areas. And due to the increasing amount of urbanization and the stress that is put up due to increasing infrastructure, this is putting pressure on the urban soil, as you can see here. This is why the land is also gradually subsiding there. And this report has warned Kolkata specifically that there is a huge heavy infrastructure on soft delta soil. So this is exactly what we have to understand, that such infrastructure must be limited and they must be going through much more rigorous investigation right now, correct? Because massive water extraction, massive infrastructure construction is making the city gradually go down and subside. And this is what the rate of subsidence in Kolkata is much more higher than the new deltas which are being formed. Correct? Because new delta can never form in Kolkata again, because such areas are covered with buildings and land and so many other apparatus. And this is exactly why during various cyclone events such as Amphan, we have seen how urban flooding has been a major crisis there. People losing their lives, people being electrocuted, people being totally miserable during such cyclone events. And this is where we have to understand the broader consequences right now. Firstly, when we understand that the deltas are sinking, so definitely the seawater level is rising in such areas. That means that the seawater, the salty water, is intruding into the various farmlands, intruding into the various groundwater resources, and that is why the areas which are undergoing this saltwater intrusion are seeing decline in fertility of agricultural land and also degradation in the quality of groundwater. Also, if you can see the map of Sundarbans from 1776 to the present times right now, how land subsidence is visible through the maps. For example, if you can see, this was the entire Sundarbans around 300 years ago. Correct? Gradually, if you can see here, right, more than I could say more than half of the Sundarbans have just vanished away forever, just because of the total amount of dams, just because of the various amounts of infrastructure and the environmental degradation happening. The next consequence, where the nature report is giving a term to us right now here, is that we all are unprepared divers. For example, we are all seeing such instances happening before our eyes. But still the management, for example, the authorities at the state and the central level, they are perhaps not doing various actions which are actually needed to preserve the ecosystems right now. That is why, for example, a diver, a scuba diver, whenever that person is going to dive for the first time, that person needs to go through extensive weeks of training. If you all have watched the movie Zindagi Na Milegi Dobara, right, you have seen how the bunch of friends actually took scuba diving lessons from Katrina Kaif. Right? So this is exactly what we have to understand. To save our river deltas, we have to be properly trained for that. We have to actually understand the risks. That is how we should be taking the measures, but we are not doing that. And at the end of the day, what all of this will be leading to? No land, no water, will be leading people to forcibly flee from such regions. According to 2019, if India is highest among the various countries who are having the highest number of climate refugees. So this is exactly what we have to take various actions, and that is what the government initiatives are also there right now to supplement the same. Firstly, we have the Mishti scheme, right, which is being implemented in around 11 states and 2 union territories here, in which we are trying to do mangrove plantations, right, and we are also trying to undertake various livelihood activities for the various sections of the people who are actually living in the coastal areas. Also, we have a national action plan for conservation of aquatic ecosystems, where we are trying to conserve the mangroves and the various associated flora and fauna. Next initiative is the sustainable aquaculture in mangrove ecosystem, where the government of India generally extends various credit functions to the fisherying communities to actually undertake fishing activities which is sustainable and not harmful for the mangrove ecosystem. Next, we have a model state of Tamil Nadu, where protected special agriculture zones in Kaveri Delta tries to prohibit various activities which are harmful for the mangrove ecosystem there. Next, we have another initiative from another state, which is the state of West Bengal, known as the Living Deltas Transdisciplinary Research Hub, which is trying to promote research and development and trying to figure out the sustainable practices that can help actually restore the lands of Sundarbans by more afforestation drives. And at the end of the day, we are using convergence of so many initiatives such as compensatory afforestation, the Manrega, and also the Project Dolphin to conserve the river ecosystem in our country, which can at the end of the day maybe help the mangroves and the further river deltas of our country. So these are all the actions and the initiatives that are by the government. We have to implement it at the very earliest. Also, the government of India, via the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, they must be detailing a proper task force to look into the long-term research and development into the long-term impact of climate change in our own river deltas. We cannot only rely on nature to give us India-specific study. Also, we need more expert consultation in this field. We need to invite foreign institutions, dignitaries, and also collaborate with the national institutions and the colleges and the various universities in the country to research and find out the solutions to this particular problem. So that was all for the topic. We will now move on to the simplified section. So before that, solve this mains practice question, all of you. So the first article is actually in the central bank digital currency, because recently the RBI is proposing to use our own e-rupee for cross-border trade. Let us first understand the very basic principle of the same, because for digital payments and the internationalization of the e-rupee, it is very important to focus firstly on the basics. The basics start with cryptocurrency. You know guys that the cryptocurrency is based on blockchain technology, correct? Now the blockchain technology is nothing but the arrangement of so many computers on a particular chain, where this chain are actually nothing but complex algorithm this computer solve, and whenever they solve such algorithms, they get rewarded with such cryptocurrencies, which are nothing but private currencies. These currencies are not issued by the government. These cryptocurrencies which are private are not regulated by any banks. They are only circulated between the people themselves who are actually part of the blockchain. Now this is a problem guys, because various illegal activities can be undertaken with such cryptocurrencies in the dark web, in the various illegal operations over the internet, and that is why RBI was never happy with the rise of cryptocurrencies. On the other hand, the rise of cryptocurrencies also have seen volatility in the prices of such popular cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin, Ether, and so many other cryptocurrencies, right? So this is exactly what we have to understand, that cryptocurrencies are very volatile. Plus, they are also used in illegal activity. That is why the RBI was never happy with it. So RBI thought of a solution, that why not we come with our own cryptocurrencies, with our own blockchain. So this is exactly what the central bank digital currency, or the digital rupee, or the e-rupee actually stands for. So this is nothing but the replacement of your physical currency in a digital medium, correct? For example, we have the various banknotes which are issued by our RBI, right? We also have the digital money, for example, the bank deposits and the e-money that we have. So this is where the central bank digital currency is falling right in the middle, where we actually have the replacement of physical currency or the banknotes as e-rupee, right? So whenever you have to transact using central bank digital currency, firstly you have to open a particular application that gives you the central bank digital currency directly from the RBI. Generally such banks are directly your banking apps, such as the SBI app or the Canada Bank app or whatever the apps are, right? In there only you have the particular feature of enrolling for central bank digital currency. So when you enroll it for the first time, you can add money directly from your bank account to the CBDCs, and whenever you add, for example, if I add 110 rupees to my central bank digital currency wallet, correct, the wallet which I have directly with the RBI. So what the RBI will do, in exchange for the 100 rupees which I exchange from my savings account, the RBI will give me 100 rupees and 10 rupees digitally in my CBDC wallet. So this is exactly how the CBDC is performing, correct? And the biggest difference between cryptocurrencies and CBDCs is that firstly, cryptocurrencies are totally unregulated. There are no banks, no government regulating them. Also, their value are extremely volatile, and there is no sovereign guarantee. That means they are not fiat currencies, they are not legal tenders, right? You all know guys that fiat currencies are those currencies firstly which can measure value in money terms, correct? And also fiat currencies must be issued by RBI or some authority, right, which is recognized by law, which makes it a legal tender, correct? So that is what we have to understand, that fiat currencies are the ones which is issued by the government, right? But in such cases, cryptocurrencies, private cryptocurrencies are not. That is exactly how the CBDCs come in, right? They are issued by the central bank. It is very easy for us to monitor them and actually track them, correct? So in this way, there are two types of CBDCs. Firstly, we have the retail CBDCs, which we use, the consumer use, and the various businesses in our country they can use to exchange various goods and services. On the other hand, we have the wholesale CBDCs, and this is where the main cross-border trade comes in, because such wholesale CBDCs are not used by individuals and businesses. These are actually used by banks and RBI and various other financial intermediaries. So this is exactly what we are trying to focus on, because the RBI has actually recommended to the center that we can actually use CBDCs when we are talking about trading with the BRICS countries. And just because of India hosting the BRICS in 2026, that is why we can actually push for going with CBDCs with reference to the trade purposes and the various other purposes with the BRICS nations. Correct? And this is exactly what India also mooted way back in G20 in 2023. Correct? And gradually over a period of time, we actually also have to realize why CBDCs are so important. Firstly, it gives us a safe alternative apart from the cryptocurrencies, which are quite unsafe, which the values are not at all safe. But if the RBI itself is issuing the e-rupee, the value is maintained by the RBI. Correct? It is reducing our dependency on physical cash. It will be promoting more financial inclusion, right? Also, it will be trying to avoid the risk associated with the cryptocurrencies in the dark net and so many other ways, right? At the end of the day, it will be making our payments much more efficient, because here these notes and the various e-rupees are actually issued directly by the RBI. So now let us actually understand why RBI wants to promote CBDC at the recent BRICS summit. Firstly, we have a SWIFT problem, guys, because Russia and Iran has been banned from SWIFT, which is the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication, because it is predominantly controlled by the US and its Western allies. So what happens here, for example, if I want to send 100 rupees from India to a friend in the US, correct? So I will be initiating the transfer in my bank account in India. Now what my bank account will be doing, my bank will be trying to encode this as a message to the SWIFT, correct? And this SWIFT will be carrying the message directly to the US bank where my friend has the account. So it is nothing but a middleman who is performing the action of carrying a message. But since Russia and Iran has been banned, we cannot make proper payments for our crude oil, for our, for example, say the payments that we have to do for the Chabahar port development. So that is why RBI is proposing, why not use e-rupee for the settlement here? Because in BRICS, we can actually use this mechanism to settle the cross-border trade. Also, on the other hand, we can use CBDCs to check black money, because currently, for example, the current system where we use cash is where the physical money, it can be used by so many criminals, correct? And then that money can be brought back in the formal economy, correct? This is how money laundering takes place. But if in the future we use CBDCs, right? This is where the central bank, right? The central bank will be coming directly into the picture. The central bank and the various other retail banks and the banking services, right? The RBI, for example, in India will be able to control the issuance of the CBDCs, because the CBDCs are based on our central bank's RBI's own blockchain technology, correct? And blockchain technology, guys, it is very difficult to interfere with or tamper with, right? So this is exactly what makes CBDCs very, very secure. And here in 2020 and 2023, there have been questions regarding blockchain and CBDCs. So you let me know in the comments what is the answer. And finally, we have the US issue too. For example, Mr. Trump has specifically warned us in October 2025 that any big country or BRICS as a whole, if they are trying to use alternate currencies such as CBDCs to trade between themselves and not use dollar, which is perhaps the most used currency in the entire world, then Mr. Trump can levy some extra tariffs. Already he has been implying and imposing so many tariffs, right? But Mr. Trump has warned that if at all we go forward, for example, if India go forward with CBDCs, India can face additional tariffs, correct? Because this is angering the US, because if we are using more CBDCs, who will be using the dollars, right? who will be giving the strength of the US economy. So this is exactly what we understand, that in the long run, we have more benefits as India, as BRICS countries. Because the cost associated with dollars are actually quite high, and there will always be a bully, right, who will be undermining our sovereignty, who will be undermining our own rupee, who will be undermining our own e-rupee or CBDCs. So it is better to gradually develop the linkages with the BRICS countries, right, and not be afraid of the US sanctions and so on, right, because India gradually have been also been signing on UPI across various countries. India has been doing various cross-border trade in local currencies with Russia and so many other countries too. So this is a warm welcome sign that we can actually see and embrace in the near future. Now we'll be moving on to the next one. The central government has approved 5,000 crore equity infusion into the SIDBI. For our prelims examination, we have to actually know the roles, responsibilities and the functions of SIDBI. And at the end of the day, for GS3, we have to actually know why this 5,000 crore has been infused recently, specifically for the growth of our MSME sector in our country. So this is where, firstly, when we talk about SIDBI, it was actually founded in 1990 under the SIDBI Act of 1989. So it is a statutory body in our country with headquarters not at Delhi or Mumbai, but it is headquartered at Lucknow. Correct. So the main function of our SIDBI is to mainly fill in the gaps that the MSME sector face in our country, right? The MSMEs are actually the micro, small, medium enterprises, for the various karkhanas and the small shops that we see all around the country, wherein they sometimes lack finance, they sometimes lack various institutions to actually grow. So that is why, to promote finance and to develop the MSMEs, the SIDBI is actually factored into. The main function that they perform is to provide refinance to banks and the NBFCs. Because guys, the NBFCs mainly and also the banks, they perform the most important role of giving loans to the MSMEs. Sometimes the MSMEs cannot perform well, sometimes they cannot repay the loans on time. But on the other hand, the NBFCs and the banks, they require funds which are stuck in those MSMEs. So that is where the SIDBI comes in. The SIDBI comes in to give loans for the loans which the banks and the NBFCs has extended to the MSMEs. So the banks and the NBFCs, they continue to run quite smoothly. So this is exactly what the functions of refinance institutions are. So for our MSMEs, we have the SIDBI. For our export-import, we have the Exim Bank, and just like that, we have so many other refinance institutions and the refinance schemes for our various sectors. For example, when we look into the composition of the board here, we have 8 directors by the central government at the SIDBI, and here one each is nominated by the 3 largest shareholders. I will be showing the shareholders also, and also 4 are elected to be the public shareholders, and they also can be selected by the board. Now, when we talk about the 5,000 crore initiative for SIDBI here given by the government of India, right? This is mainly to expand the MSMEs in our country. And this allocation has been made by the Department of Financial Services under the Ministry of Finance here. Now, here when we are talking about the shareholder, mainly the SIDBI and the ownership is distributed between the government of India having the highest share, followed by SBI, LIC, NABARD and others. So this kind of precedence is very important for your prelims, guys. Also, when we talk about here, the SIDBI as of 2025 March has extended around 5 lakh crore of loans, guys. And the loan portfolio can be broken down into banks and the various financial institutions to the tune of 77%. Then come the NBFCs and then come the microfinance institutions. And a very small percentage of the same loans are given to the MSMEs by SIDBI. But mainly they give the MSMEs loans indirectly via giving loans to the banks and the NBFCs and the microfinance institutions. Mainly when we talk about the funding source of the SIDBI, they come from domestic borrowing and mainly from the micro, medium, small enterprises refinance funds, and sometimes the fund and the money also come from the overseas borrowings. Right now, when we are talking about this 5,000 crore which has been approved by the government for the SIDBI, this is mainly to boost the bank's CRAR or capital to risk weighted assets ratio. Now this ratio stands for bank's capital divided by the risk-weighted assets. The risk-weighted assets are those assets or the risky loans of the banks which are actually quite difficult for the banks to recover, because simply the borrowers are not interested in paying money because of their own losses and various other impacts. And that is why the banks must be having a very huge amount of capital. This capital will be saving the banks from such bad loans. Correct? So the more number of bank capital or bank's own money, the better. And that is why the SIDBI has given 5,000 crore as kind of equity infusion into the various banks here. Right? So this is where the equity here will be with the SIDBI, or say the ownership of the funds will be with the SIDBI, and these funds will be given to the banks, the NBFCs, just to make them much more safer, just to make them much more stronger, and hence create various jobs. Because according to this article here, one MSME unit creates an average employment of 4.37 people per factory or per MSME. Correct? And if we can actually create around 25 lakh new units, we can actually create 1.12 crore new jobs. So this is what the objective of this particular infusion is. And right now, this is all for the same. We will now moving on to the next one. The Ministry of Home Affairs have asked the Central Armed Police Forces officers to spend 15 nights in the border villages. And this is a very good initiative undertaken, mainly for the development of the border villages of our country. So this is why this program also has been tagged under the Vibrant Villages program. And for our GS3, this can also be a very good initiative under the border management. But firstly, let us understand what we mean by the Central Armed Police Forces. These are actually composed of the BSF, the CRPF, the CISF, ITBP, the SSB, Assam Rifles and the NSG. You all know guys that the BSF patrols Pakistan and Bangladesh border. The CRPF mainly looks into the counter Naxalism activities, internal security at various sections of our country. Next, the CISF is actually entrusted with protecting our infrastructure at airports, PSU, etc. Also, the ITBP guards our India-China border, and the SSB, right, which is also a very important border force. It looks into the border between Nepal and Bhutan for border security. Finally, Assam Rifles looked into the various issues in northeast parts of our country, plus the border security with Myanmar too. And at the end of the day, we have the counter-terrorism unit, right, who also played a very important role in Operation Blue Star. In the comments you let me in which year and for what this operation was held for. So this is where we are also talking about the NSG. In this map also, if you can see here, we have the SSB, we have the Assam Rifles, we have the BSF, the ITBP patrolling our borders, right? These are most important, institutions protecting our borders, right? Mainly we have the CRPF, CISF, which is looking into the internal security apparatus of our country, alongside the NSG too. Now the Ministry of Home Affairs have actually instructed the police authorities in the countries to have eyes and ears open for our border villages, because the police should increase their movement in border villages as a part of the Vibrant Village program. Now phase 1 of the Vibrant Village program here is talking about the development of more than 2,900 villages in our country in the various regions of Ladakh, Himachal, Uttarakhand, Sikkim, Arunachal Pradesh, right, where we are trying to have an holistic border development of the region, right? Here we actually have to preserve the various local identities, we have to preserve the local defense apparatus, and also promote livelihood of the local people. Now guys, let us actually look into this 15-night strategy. So the Ministry of Home Affairs have told that the CAPF, including all of them, plus the state police authorities, they should be spending 50 nights per year in border villages, mainly for the primary task of intelligence gathering, because a lot of illegal migration, a lot of anti-national activities take place in our national borders. Firstly, human intelligence can be deployed for gathering more intelligence, and at the end of the day, they can also have more connections with the local people. They can also have more trust building with the local people. And this can lead to more force multipliers, or this can take the youth, the elderly, the religious institutions, the local businesses together. right? So this is where the social integration is coming. The socio-economic integration must be there because the CAPF and the state police authorities, they must be going to the various extreme sections of our border villages. They must be looking into how the people there actually live, what are the various activities they do. And at the end of the day, right, they can also lead to more economic boost. For example, say, our own Home Minister, in the recent statement, they told that in Arunachal Pradesh, ITBP has done a very good job. This you can also give as a case study in your mains answer, guys. And the Home Minister also told that the district collectors and the CAPFs must be setting up milk cooperatives in the local areas just to give more employment and to build more trust. Because at the end of the day, you know, when we are in a war, right, we also have to play psychological warfare. We cannot alienate the local villagers in our border villages because they are our first villages, not the last villages, guys. That is why we have to build the confidence, we have to win over the people there, we have to take them together in the national development, and that is where the local people can also support our own Indian national security cause. So this was all for this one. We'll now moving on to the next one. According to recent RBI reports, the FDI outflows from our country have been very concerning, and this is where, from the perspective of FDI trends and rupee depreciation for prelims, we will be trying to focus on the basic concepts. Also, for your GS through external sector, it is extremely important to know the concepts of FDI and the recent data here. Firstly, the article is talking about the concept of FDI here. You know, guys, that the FDI is kind of a foreign investment. It is one kind of a foreign investment where a company comes with their huge resources, money, machinery, and lots of investment in a country, for example, like India. So they set up new factories, they set up new buildings, and that is why they actually have a long-term vision of giving employment in the country and generating profits from the country, right? On the other hand, we also have the FPI, which is also popularly known as hot money. Now, these are the usual investors, the foreign investors who come to India for some profits. Whenever they get the same, they exit. According to formal definitions, more than 10% ownership in an Indian company or in any company in the country by some foreigners or foreign investors is known as FDI. Less than 10% is actually known as FPI. And this is where we also understand, guys, that FPI outflows in 2026 have been at the tune of around $3.26 billion, apart from the FDI outflows too. Now, when we talk about the net FDI, it is nothing but the gross inflows, the total amount of investments that come under FDI and which came into India in a particular period, minus the total number of profits that these FDI investors took from India to abroad, and also minusing the various FDI that Indians actually do in the rest of the world. So net FDI is gross inflows minus repatriation minus total outward FDI from India. Right? So this is exactly what we understand, that when we talk about the gross inflows, this is totaling around $6.41 billion. Repatriation is around $5.34 billion. So you actually understand a lot of profits actually go abroad. And at the end of the day, when we talk about our own Indians doing FDI abroad, it is at the total of $1.51 billion. Correct? And that is why we have to understand that also when we talk about the sector specific breakdown, correct? More than 70% of the outward FDI was actually in manufacturing, financial sector and insurance. Correct? Now there are some reasons behind that. Firstly, understand why, our country is facing a twin deficit fear. On one hand, our currency is severely depreciating. On the other hand, FDI is also flowing out. Correct? And the RBI data is also showing that. If you can see here. Now this is actually a very vicious cycle, because you have to understand, guys, if we have a depreciating rupee, firstly, for example, if the investors are leaving India, they are actually leaving a lot of rupees in the Indian market and they are demanding a lot of dollars. So definitely whenever demand of dollars will increase, dollar will appreciate and rupee will depreciate. So this is exactly what is happening right now. If rupee is severely depreciating, correct, this is increasing the demand for dollars, and this is leading to a crash of the value of rupee, which is making our crude oil imports and the various other imports much more expensive. correct? And also this leads to much more uncertainty, because if the investors are leaving India, correct, so new investors will not come in. So there is a lot of uncertainty here. So the value of investments will come down, and if the value of investments come down, again the existing investors will be leaving India. And this is exactly what is happening right now, guys. Due to severe depreciation, our investors are going away, and due to this current depreciation, again the investors are not actually encouraged to come back into India. Why this is happening here, guys? Why investments are going to the rest of the world from India? Firstly, the reason is Mr. Trump to blame, because Mr. Trump is attracting a lot of business using tariffs into the US, because Donald Trump has been imposing tariffs on major countries such as India, and that is why investors are pulling out their money and they are putting the money directly in the US. This is actually known as onshoring. Onshoring is a process in which US is onshoring some companies from abroad, and this is due to the various instances of tariffs which is happening right now. That is why Indians are also investing abroad. The outward FDI, that is why, is increasing. Also, there are higher interest rates in the West. You know, guys, whenever there are higher interest rates in the West, for example, than India, correct, this can always mean that the investors will have better returns if they invest in the US bonds, for example, as compared to the Indian bond market. So that is why a lot of investors are demanding more dollars to invest in the US, and that is why it's leading to rupee depreciation again. Also, the foreign investors repatriated $5.34 billion as a part of their profit that they took out from India to the US. So this was also one of the reasons. So first reason is onshoring, second is high interest rate, and thirdly is the huge number of profits, due to which they're leaving a lot of rupees in the market and demanding dollar. And if obviously the supply of rupees in the Indian market is increasing, that will be leading to depreciation of our Indian currency. So this was all for the topic. Right now you have 2 PYQs to solve, which are very conceptual in nature. Let me know the answers in the comments below. And right now we'll be moving on to the last article. So the Department of Telecom has come up with a National Frequency Allocation Plan to actually make things much more easier for the consumers of Wi-Fi in the country. Now all of you use Wi-Fi on a day-to-day basis, right? We use that using our routers, and these routers are actually functioning due to our internet service providers, correct? There are so many internet service providers, for example Airtel, Jio and whatnot, right? We have the various ISPs providing internet to us, and the ISPs generally fit optical fiber to our routers, and the routers actually transmit the radio waves to our smartphones, to our devices, right? And these radio waves actually have a spectrum. For example, they can be of 2.4 gigahertz, 5 gigahertz and 6 gigahertz. So this is exactly what we see on our devices, right? And obviously, you know, guys, the more gigahertz that you use, the faster your internet connection would be, correct? But also you have to understand, the more that you use, the coverage or the range of the Wi-Fi also reduces. So this means that, you know, a 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi connection can cover a larger area, but it can cover much more slower speeds as compared to 5 gigahertz and 6 gigahertz. The Department of Telecom has notified de-licensing of 500 gigahertz of spectrum in the lower frequency range of the 6 gigahertz band. Now this is actually expected to make Wi-Fi services much more faster in the country. And here actually, when we talk about using faster Wi-Fi 6 speeds, for example 6 gigahertz speeds, which is also known by the term of 6E and 7, right? We can have much more lower delays in internet connection, faster speeds, and also for better virtual reality or augmented reality experiences, because these are the services which require very high speeds. But what is the issue right now, guys? We have two actors to play at two sides. Firstly, we have the telecom companies, right? The telecom companies always had some issues with the internet service providers, right? For example, the Wi-Fi services make WhatsApp call and the various other calling and video calling much more cheaper than if you would have used the same using telecom services. It would have been much more expensive, right? Also, on the other hand, Wi-Fi speeds are much more faster than the telecom speeds, right? So this is exactly what we have to understand, that this segment of internet services or broadband services versus the telecom sector has always been in conflict with each other. So here, what the Department of Telecom did, it tried to liberalize the upper frequencies in the 6 GHz spectrum, which the telecom company used to allege that they would have used this in the rural areas, because this extra amount of spectrum, if at all the telecom companies could use it, it can use it to enhance the various connectivity in the rural areas at a very faster speed, right? But at the other hand, the Department of Telecommunication has clarified that no license or frequency is required to actually establish, maintain, work or possess any kind of wireless equipment for the purpose of low power indoor and very low power outdoor wireless access systems, including routers and various other things which actually run on very low power. So the Department of Telecom told that the telecom companies, you are trying to have more profits citing rural areas, but when we actually can give the same amount of incentive of 6 GHz spectrum to the normal customers also, they can also be benefiting, correct? So this is exactly what the US tech majors are also supporting. Meta, HP, Apple, Amazon, all are demanding to de-license the entire 1200 MHz spectrum that is in the 6 GHz for Wi-Fi services, so that their websites can run much more smoother. Their websites and services can actually be much more efficient. Reliance Jio has demanded that the entire 120 MHz spectrum available in the 6 GHz band should be included in the upcoming spectrum allocation for the telecom sector, because they have their own intentions in mind to be used in profit making purposes. So this means that as of now the DOT has actually told that this extra spectrum which is available for the 6 GHz Wi-Fi can actually be used by the consumers, and that way the various internet service providers can right now offer better internet services using the spectrum which is right now freely available, and this will actually reduce the cost for the customers, right? And this is exactly what is important for our internet penetration in the country. Even in the rural areas, the people can be using the same to boost their internet connectivity. So this was all for today. I thank you all for being a very patient audience. Please do attempt the quiz which is following up right now. Till we meet again, all the best and best of luck. Thank you.